prepared this panel in Spanglish to honor the US-Mexico Forum. And I wanted to start with this image, our beautiful Gulf of California. My name is Octavio Aburto. I am a professor at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography here at UCSD. I have been studying the Gulf of California for more than 30 years, but always that I see this image, I remember that also I am a passionate, an activist, and a diplomat, because I have been trying to protect and manage better this region. And as you can see in this other image as well, it's the Gulf of California. It's a unified biome, ecoregion, and the reason why we should discuss this in a binational way is very, very important, including California, including Arizona, and all the states related with the Gulf of California. And although it's an ecological unified region, politically speaking, is very fragmented. And despite decades of scientific research on this ecosystem, knowledge has not yet translated into consistent public policy and binational actions to ensure protection and well management and restoration, I also wanted to say. So I thank Rafael for this. English. Okay, let's continue in English. And I want to thank Rafael for this invitation, also Rocio, Fundación Coppel for to put this this topic in this forum, and I hope in other forums, because as you have been hearing all this yesterday and today, we need a lot of effort to create binational bridges. And I believe that science and scientists, we are a key element to create these bridges between science and decision-making, between data and policy, and between evidence and real change. So this panel tries to explore the power of science diplomacy to build or to create an alliance, a cross-border alliance, to integrate science, data, institutional collaborations, and public engagement across different disciplines and geographies. And today, I brought you very important people here, and I'm gonna mention very brief, just one line. Ezcurra Ezcurra, professor of ecology at UC Riverside. Joaquin Ruiz, vice president for global environmental futures, director of Biosphere 2. Catalina Stern, director of UNAM Tucson, physicist and academic leader, fostering cross-border scientific and social cooperation. And Zinnya del Villar, director of technology, data, and innovation at Data Pop Alliance. And together, we want to start this working group. As Rafael mentioned, this is just a start to see how science diplomacy can help us create better outcomes in these times in these political times. But Ezcurra, let's start with you. Tell us just a reference about what the ecological science is saying about the main challenges today for the Gulf of California. I think it's on.
Yeah, this is on. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rafael. There you are with the lights. It's difficult sometimes to see. For inviting me, it's an honor. It's an honor to share this panel with all my distinguished colleagues, especially Joaquin Ruiz, who's been a friend for many, many years and is really a powerhouse in binational dialogue and cooperation, has been for a long time really working in this region in an amazing way. Octavio asked me about the big challenges for the Gulf of California. I want just to bring two because we're very short in time and I don't want to take too much time, but one that I would bring to the table is not only an environmental challenge in the strict sense, but it's an environmental and also socio-political challenge, in my opinion, which is getting our decision makers and politicians understand that the Gulf of California is the last part, the marine part, of a huge watershed, of a huge basin that starts in the United States and ends in Sinaloa and even in Nayarit and Cabo in Mexico. It's very difficult to understand the challenges of this region if we don't see it in a binational perspective. Because whatever we do in one part or in one country will necessarily have impacts in the other. And this is, seriously, scientists, I think, in general understand this quite well. But administrators and politicians, much more concerned about their short-term decisions and their own area of authority, very often have difficulties understanding this. And this is a big, big challenge for the future. I will bring now another one that is strictly environmental, and I want to share with you. Last week, we published a paper with some colleagues from Mexico and the United States, a number of colleagues. It was a 10-author paper from both sides of the border on a number of things on the state of desert vegetation in the American Southwest and Mexico's Northwest. But one of the things that really blew our mind is with a lot of effort we downloaded databases on temperature from both Mexico and the United States. We downloaded all the weather stations from Vegas to Cabo and to Sinaloa. And amazingly, we found something that suddenly explained a lot of the things we were observing, which is summer temperatures have been climbing in the last 4 decades at a rate of around 1 Fahrenheit per decade, which is around 1 degree Celsius every 18 years. This means that in a century, summer temperatures in our deserts are going to rise around 5 Celsius, 10 Fahrenheit. That's a lot. There's a big difference between, say, 40 Celsius and 45, or between 110 Fahrenheit and 120. Among other things, because I don't want to be overly technical, what atmospheric physicists call the water vapor pressure deficit, which is an estimate of the evaporative demand of the atmosphere, rises exponentially after 40 degrees Celsius. And the heater it gets, the evaporative demand increases more than proportionally. What this means is that our summers have been getting really hot, will keep on getting very hot, and a lot of the formulas we had for managing our agricultural areas or our water are actually already becoming limited by the summer temperatures. And we're already seeing consequences of that. That interaction between water demand and temperature is a huge challenge. For example, the city of Hermosillo is running out of water, and they resolved it in the short term by building the Canal Acueducto Independencia, the Independence Aqueduct, that is getting money from getting water and money, of course, from the Yaqui River, and sort of taking away water from the Yaqui people that lived from that watershed, bringing a huge issue of environmental justice into our region, into Mexico's northwest. So the point I want to bring here is that the concept we had until a few decades ago of sustainability in the region based on the type of green revolution agriculture based on the cultivation of a lot of things that demand high amounts of water under irrigation will have to be reviewed. It needs to be reviewed as quickly as possible. This is a huge challenge. Water in the region, in the context of increasing temperatures, will not be enough. And that has consequences all the way from the way we feed ourselves to the way effluents come into the Sea of Cortez and have an impact in ocean waters. So I'll stop it there because I'm taking too much time, but that's my initial idea on the issues here.
And can you complement that, Joaquin, maybe with your transboundary work that you have been doing about these big challenges?
Thank you. Thank you, Rafael, for inviting us. I think I was impressed by the panel that preceded us, which was on the tourism. I'll get back to what Exequiel was saying. But I think connecting tourism to fundamental science in the area is a really good idea, because we all are running around trying to worry about issues like what Exequiel said, and the solutions may not be within the boundaries of our thinking. So having the tourist folks and having the scientists working on the ecosystems, working together on solutions, I think is a brilliant idea. Now, Exequiel just hit it right on the head, and obviously everybody talks about global climate change, and nobody really says that the hammer of global climate change is always water, right? It's not only the temperatures that are worrisome, but as global climate change progresses, water availability becomes a big issue, either too much or too little. And sadly, in the case of the Gulf of Cortez and the whole region that we're discussing, water availability is a real problem. Now, people have been worrying about water availability for agriculture, and I think that thinking about water availability only in the case of agriculture is limited, because it also will impact in indirect ways the way that people can live in the region, and also, let's not forget what has been said already here, that in the end, man-made issues will have huge consequences on the environment. A little bit about the environment, and it already was said by the folks in the tourism board. This area in northern, in the Gulf of Cortez is just beautiful. It's a biological sort of incredible place. And even though it still is an incredible place, the challenges of keeping it beautiful are going to be huge, not only because of natural systems like lack of water, but because of the needs of the people that live in the area and how they're going to be dealing with this. I've been working for 14 years at Biosphere 2, looking at ecosystem services. How does the ecosystem help us move forward the ecosystem, but also the people that live in those areas? As an example, and these are the kinds of questions that we ask ourselves all the time, and that I think you folks, more than us, are ready to give us the answers. Let's just talk about corals. Corals are all dying out because of the temperatures of the waters around the world. And they're not dying out. I mean, everybody talks that they're dying out. They're not dying out. Scientifically, the corals will survive us because they've been around for 100 million years or more, but they'll move from where they are now. And they will leave the people that are living out of corals without a livelihood. Now, what people live out of corals? Tourism, fisheries. So can we create a coral that's a Frankenstein coral that will survive the temperatures that are upon us, but will actually do damage to the idea of having biodiversity in the coral systems? That's a big ethical question that should not only be in the hands of the scientists that are dealing with this stuff, but that should be in the hands of the folks that are dealing with the people that are living from the corals. And I can go on with 4 other sort of technological advances on how to grow food with solar panels and so on, each one of those having huge consequences in how people live. In addition to the biodiversity of the system. So that's the kind of stuff that we all have to be thinking about, and I think that it requires a lot of people with a lot of different thinking to figure out the ethical consequences of some of the things that we're trying to do to maintain either tourism or maintain biodiversity. And sometimes you can't do both. Thank you.
And to follow with this, Catalina, what do you see the barriers precisely to increase this cooperation across borders?
Well, there are many barriers. The first great barrier, I think, is mistrust. We have to put, as they all said, a lot of people together to discuss what to do and what actions are the correct ones. But we just had a couple of examples. The Water Commission, the Mexican-U.S. Water Commission, has managed a lot of barriers for a long time, and the people in that were talking about tourism, of course, they have included the people and the public, not the public policy yet, but yes, the scientists. And I think, well, barriers are many. If you're talking about two countries, sovereignty, cultural differences, rules, but I think the only way diplomacy can start is by communication and education. I always think that education is the main part of everything, and when I talk about education, I'm not talking about what we do in schools, it is included, but it's also what we do with communities and what we do with the people that make public policies. And I think I will talk a little bit more about education later, but I think there are many examples of how communities can get together, binational communities can get together. I don't work here in California, but I know very good examples of how communities they started in Sonora, Arizona for health issues. They started with the communities. They started making programs of leadership programs, binational leadership programs, and from their discussions and their agreements and taking into account everybody, they have shown what is the framework for bilateral collaboration. And they started with these small groups. They ended up with bigger groups. You probably heard that during the pandemia, I don't know how many thousands of Mexicans were brought to the US without a visa to get a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. So that happened not because there was a big diplomacy, but because locally the people had been talking together and they had trust and they knew that it was important for both sides to have this vaccination. I think that's a great example. Right now there's a binational community that takes care of health all along the border, and it started by local communities, and I think that's the way we can start. We can convince the people, they can talk together, and then they can talk about what the regulations should be, and etc. I think I can give other examples, but I think that's the way we have to start.
So trust is very, very important. Zinnya, I know that you are not an expert necessarily in the Gulf of California, but you have been working with many of these issues. And what do you think about the data gaps that we have that limit the creation of this trust or other things like the social justice?
Yes. Well, I think that before talking about data, it's important because now all of us, we are talking about data, but I think that this is a kind of a new keyword of technology that we have around us. And I want to explain the broader context about this. You talk about it, Octavio, at the beginning of this panel, that the problem is that despite all this work that you have done, the scientific community, in particular, for example, in the Mar de Cortés, there's a lack of communication with public policy, a lack of communication with action of binational action, and of course with the communities. And it's very important what Katy said, we have a gap in education, and it is not of course, at these days, I think that data is essential to all the professions to be educated in data. But if we are not educated, it's essential for us to educate how we communicate on these issues, especially, for example, in this case of the Mar de Cortés. We have, I would say, the community of scientists that they have do this in the last decades, a lot of work, amazing work, but they are not explaining in a good way what they are doing, what are this data is explaining for all the community, right? So this gap, we need to reduce how we are communicating all this knowledge and how we are translating this knowledge into public policy action, into community strategies, into a binational action between these two countries. So now, if I focus in the data and specifically, I see, I'm not an expert of the region, but in general, this is happening in all the environmental scientists and climate change part, is that we have a kind of a detailed community or region data and a high-level data. In this case, for example, the granular, temporally, and spatial data, we have in this case, and specifically because we have two countries that they have a completely different data strategy, we need to have interoperability data, we need to have frameworks in this zone to collect, to measure, to monitor what we are want to check. Especially because of the, well, I think that is your expertise, Octavio, especially, for example, fishes. So the fishes, they don't know borders, right? So they go to United States, they come to Mexico, et cetera, and we need to understand how they are moving and how we will monitor with the same framework and to measure these communities. That's the principle that I think that we have a lot of gap on that frameworks that we can have. Another one that is very important is that we need to have data of humans too. If we want to protect the environment, we need to have disaggregated data of humans of all this region. And this disaggregated data with an intersectional perspective that is gender, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, et cetera, because this region is amazing. We have a very rich region of very different people, and all these people is impact directly the environment of the Mar de Cortés. And finally, of course, this temporary data, right? That we need to have a framework where we need to have the data temporarily around in each, well, you decide when exactly, but we need to have specifically temporary data. Then at high level, and I think that here the amazing institution, National Statistics Institutes are doing a great job, but still we are missing on this data is all the climate change impact and how the communities are adapting to this climate change impact that we have. A second one is the lack of frameworks of climate change, lack of policies of climate change, what is happening around the world and in each region, and specifically, for example, the region of this Mar de Cortés, how we can react to a problem of climate change. And finally, and we in general around the world, we don't have this type of data, the impact of policies that we are implementing. So how do we measure these policies, if they are a good policy or a bad policy, for whom and which kind of metrics? And this is information that is essential for us to really work together in the region.
Okay, so in order to have some questions from the public, I have 3 questions for you, but I'm gonna just ask you one more question that is basically how you envision science diplomacy can help us basically breaking these barriers. So Catalina, what mechanisms do you see to foster these collaborations? How can educational institutions like UNAM can open these opportunities to move and transform what we are seeing right now?
Yesterday, Anne McLennan used a word that I loved, and she said to do things with intentionality. I think we have to educate with intentionality. I think we have to change the way we are educating our young people and our public and everybody, because as Zinnya just said, the message from the scientists is not going to the public. I'm gonna try to say many things fast. I worked a long time ago in a water pump that worked with wave energy. The idea was to put shrimp larvae inside a lagoon that was close to the ocean. So this thing was invented in UNAM, and we had to go to a community to make it work. So how do we get this technology? What we wanted, of course, was the fishermen would learn how to use the pump. It was not for us. So how do you do that? The first thing was, how do we access the community? So the first thing was, we went and talked to the fishermen. But the most important part is that we had a group of young educational psychologists that got involved with the community. They went and talked with the children. They asked them what they knew. Fishermen don't trust scientists. Scientists think fishermen don't know anything and they are not worried about the environment. So how can we make this link? Talking. The first thing is to make people talk together. So these young women were able to talk with the children, that talked with their parents, and it was an amazing community. Everybody, they helped us put the water pump, but they did something else. They helped us take the measurements, because you cannot put any amount of salt water inside the lagoon. So they knew that they could not put all the larvae they want. And how did they know that? They had to learn that they started to measure the salinity. So there was a collaboration in the, like citizen science. It's citizen science with the people that are going to use the technology, and they participated and understood what were the limits. So I think this is a good way of putting the community so they understand what we're trying to do and our worries about what we're trying to do and how useful it can be for them to understand it. I think that's a good example. And I think for education, we have to change the way schools work. We have many, many examples in the world of how the communities can learn things, but unfortunately, this is not institutionalized. I cannot give you, there are probably local examples in UNAM and in many universities, but this is not the way the institution has their programs. It's probably initiatives of some professors. I know that Julia Garabias has many of these things. We have to change that. There are many methodologies now that can be used. People know about them. For some reason, they're not implemented institutionally. For example, one of the ways of teaching sustainability in a transversal way in one of the universities I know is to use a method called funds of knowledge. That means you talk with each of the students, and whatever they already know, and this is important in communities that come from different backgrounds, because it helps inclusion. So that's, for border areas, that's very important. So you accept that the child that's there, or the person, the fisherman, has of knowledge, and you have to build on that knowledge. And why is that important? Because that knowledge is part of himself. Then it's not only something he read, it's something that he's committed to. And I know you're worried about time, so I won't talk anymore.
So more citizens, scientists. Zinnya, how technological advances can help us, what Catalina was.
Yes, I think that right now we have all these amazing technologies and examples, as Katy said. especially data-driven technologies that we can well, I will try to do a brief summary. For example, the cross-border open source databases that all the profiles that are working in the Mar de Cortés can collect data and share their data. This is important. It's really, really important. With the same frameworks that I mentioned before, is how we can do these interoperability databases, and with these interoperability databases, we will have data that is of high quality, and this data we can translate for public policy. So the second one, that is part of this collaborative intelligence, where all the persons involved in the decision and in the sector can be part of the solution too. The second one, all these platforms, for example, of mapping. We have two great examples that I think that the most part of us we use. One is Wikipedia, that they have a clear process of data collection around the world with this collective intelligence, of course, with a layer of evaluation and quality, et cetera, et cetera. Another one that I really love in georeference is OpenStreetMap, that we have mappers around the world with a specific protocol on how to map what do you have. So we can copy about this type of platforms that are global and try to use it for the specific regions that we have, or maybe do an alliance with them, especially with OpenStreetMap. I work a lot with them, and they have a great program that they can train the communities to map exactly what we want, and we will have the mapping there with the community. Another one, as Katy said, the citizen applications. I am really fan, for example, because my children use it, was eBirth. That this is an application in the phone that you can use with this is for kids, but I think that you have a version for the adults that you can use to take a photo of a bird, to see exactly what the bird is doing. So it's very ludic for the children, and you are collecting data for the laboratories, right? So all this intelligence, we can use the community to give us this knowledge through technology, and this can be useful for the change of the environment.
And Joaquin, so how we can create more collaboration, binational collaboration between our institutions?
I'm going to answer the question in a different way. So I think, I mean, if you just look at the region, and Exequiel said it beautifully, what happens in Las Vegas is going to affect what's going to be happening in the Gulf, right? Think about the scale. Now think about some of the huge issues that are in this region. Phoenix running out of water, Hermosillo running out of water. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to recognize that there's going to be a desalination plant somewhere, probably more than one. So the questions that we have to start asking ourselves right now is, under those conditions, where should they be? How should they be done? It's not that they're not going to happen, but we should make them happen in a way that doesn't destroy the region as we know it. The second thing that's huge in this region, it has the biggest solar radiation in the world, in Mexico. You could plaster solar panels in Olo Sonora, and it would be all the power needed for all of the country. But is that what we want to do? And if we're going to do it, how are we going to do it? How are we going to keep the ejidos and the nations that exist in the state of Sonora functioning culturally properly? So those are the kinds of questions that we, the third question in my view, which is really huge, is the opportunity of using carbon credits to bring in funds to this country, to this part of the region, because you can actually putz around with the soil. You can start growing food that grows in seawater, or grow plants that grow in seawater, get carbon credits from those, or from mangroves. There's all kinds of ways that technologically and using ecosystem services, you can change the system completely. So we know how to do all that. There's an economy issue here that we have to deal with, but there's also the issue of what do we want this place to look like 30 years from now? And not only ecologically, but culturally. So we have to start thinking of those huge consequences. They're coming. The question is not whether we're not going to have these plants, that we're going to have them. So how to deal with those properly? We're going to have solar panels. How to deal with those properly? How do we make things better instead of worse through technology?
So, Ezequiel, I reserve the easiest one for you. So to close this before we open to the public, how we can restore all the biodiversity that we have lost in the region, including with all the challenges that we are facing.
We have 9 minutes. We have 9 minutes, and we need to open it for questions. I just want to say something very quickly. I'm a scientist, and of course, as a scientist, I'm a big user of technological tools for my research, so I don't want to sound like a technophobe, but I want to bring here a hypothesis and an idea. We have some amazing examples of success in taking care of the environment around the Gulf of California. They're really amazing, I think. The islands of the Gulf of California have been very successfully protected. They are in my opinion, they're the most protected and most pristine archipelago in the world, as a matter of fact. We have the success of Cabo Pulmo, to which Dr. Aburto has contributed in an immense way, which is the most incredible example in the world of the recovery of a reef when the local community decides to take care of the reef. We have the great example, it's a World Heritage Site recognized by UNESCO for whaling lagoons in San Ignacio and Ojo de Liebre, Scammons Lagoon. And we have some amazing protected areas like the Pinacate, for example, also a World Heritage Site. And I could go on and on and on. If you look at those examples in detail, invariably, they emerged not from high tech and great new ideas, but from just scientists from Mexico and the United States spending time with the local community and understanding the local community, bringing a scientific perspective to the interests of the local community, creating something that works locally, and then bringing it to the federal government in Washington, D.C. or in Mexico City for recognition. But it is this combination, in my belief, or in my opinion, of scientists from both countries that think the border is a silly idea and want to work together with the local communities that have made these incredible revolutions in the region. And we have big challenges that we will need to tackle, and we will need to tackle in the decades to come. But we shall always remember, if we want to feed our hope for a viable and successful future, that we also have in the Gulf of California some of the most amazing success stories in conservation. And we must build from there into the future. That's my belief. Thank you.
So before I open for questions, I remember this phrase from Dr. Ezcurra. He has been saying, the landscape of hope. And I think we need to continue looking for that landscape, and I will add seascape. Questions? And also, I want to ask Rocío Abud to tell us comment about this panel and how science diplomacy should continue moving to the next forum. Is there a mic, Uda?
Thank you, Octavio. First of all, thank you very much, Rafa, for sharing this space to talk about the sustainability of the Sea of Cortez and the prosperity of its communities. As we all know, it's a very rich ecosystem that doesn't know about borders. So species, rivers, oceans, they don't recognize any boundaries. So we could not have a rich conversation about US-Mexico relationships if we don't talk about a joint protection of our joint ecosystems, no? And this is one of the richest ecosystems. So as Rafa just said also, we hope that this is just the beginning of a shared conversation, and so that we can build responsible joint actions between US and Mexico. Thank you very much to both of the panels, and well, we hope to continue this conversation in Foro Mar de Cortés.
Yes, thank you all. Octavio, did you mean to? Okay. A couple of things. We have many, many years of science on this sea, the nursery of the Pacific. It's a very degraded sea right now. We know that. It's not just applying the science that we have or additional science. It's time for action. The sea is so degraded that this summer, 2/3 of it you could not swim in. You couldn't go into the water because of the medusa. So we have degradation from the farms in the United States, where the runoff goes into the sea, through the Yaqui Valley, through Hermosillo, and not a single town or city has adequate sewage treatment. Not a single city on all of the sea, all the way down, is treating its effluent. So to me, it's a call for action, because there is a tipping point where the sea cannot recover. 60% of the fish are gone. The development pressure is huge, but we don't have the resources for that. There is no sustainable tourism for Baja California Sur at this point. We're in the second over 1,000-year drought in 5 years. So I guess my call is for a process for action and enforcement for what we already know, and how we bring that forward to bring the sea back.
Yes, I think there is another question here, but this is one of the points that I want to highlight, and I think I agree with you, Christy. Science must move beyond just the diagnosis of the region. We need to move towards an action. So this should be a very important branch of this working group.
Yes, thank you. My name is Al Sweeler. I'm a US MEX, and there's been an enormous amount of work focused on water, which is quite legitimate. But related to that is the energy element that is rarely discussed. Almost all of the solutions that people are thinking about are going to require some form of energy to implement. And the IBWC knows this. Some of you may be familiar with the Good Neighbor Environmental Board, where this was discussed a year or so ago. But unless there's share information between the energy sector, oil and gas in particular, and the ecology and environmental sector, you're going to end up with energy plans. You mentioned desal, which is going to affect the water supply one way or another. So one element of this group that you're putting together should include the need and the type of energy that's going to be required to deal with the local communities and further development.
Any comment?
Well, I agree with you completely. There is no boundary, actually. There's any calculation on water has to have calculations on energy. And the only thing I would say to what you said is that, again, we're living, this region has a highest solar radiance in all of Mexico, so solar solutions have to be part of it. And how that affects the ecosystems as well is going to have to be part of it. I don't think it has to be oil and gas. And it also, it doesn't have to be, for the cities, it certainly has to be desal from the ocean, in my opinion. But for local areas, it can be desal of deep water sources, which is a very different kind of requirements in energy and infrastructure than you need for desaling in the ocean. But they all have consequences.
Well, I think we ran out of time. If there is no one more comment, I just want to finish with that this working group also will try to increase this binational cooperation, and for sure this science diplomacy work that we have been doing, I hope that could restore many of the ecosystems that we have lost and also recover the prosperity of many communities. So thank you very much for everyone.